Two things can be true on this, which is crime is bad in D.C. It's also a little better than it was, but it's still bad. And also having troops in the streets are a bad thing.
Hello, listeners. I'm Clarissa Moll. Welcome to the show. Joining me today are senior commentator Russell Moore. Hey, Russell.
Hello.
And political commentator and former U.S. Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Adam, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
On Monday, President Trump declared Washington, D.C. to have a public safety emergency and said that federal troops will engage in crime fighting in the city in response. Last week, a DOJ staffer, Edward Corsetine, was assaulted by 10 teenagers in D.C. in an attempted carjacking. And I'm wondering, Adam, as we begin here, is this a knee-jerk reaction to that incident or a rising tension that's finally coming to a head?
I mean, I think a couple things can be true. I think it's a reaction to... It's kind of like a convenient time to do it. So it's not like I think this was always planned, but it's like, hey, okay, this is our moment because this made news. This guy's, part of the Trump administration, and I think that was it. It's also, quite honestly, I think an attempt to kind of take people's eyes off the Epstein issue because this is, that continues to be pretty big. And but I think this was always planned, and whether it would happen now, whether it was going to happen in a month or two. This is part of, frankly, the administration trying to look tough. And honestly, two things can be true on this, which is crime is bad in D.C. It's also a little better than it was, but it's still bad. And also having troops in the streets are a bad thing. And, that goes back to the founding of this country and the chilling effect of that.
So this Home Rule Act of 1973, what exactly is that, and how have you seen Washington respond so far?
Yeah, so basically, D.C., the federal government owns Washington, D.C., but, Washington, D.C. is trying to get statehood, has been trying to be an independent state. There's a lot of complications in that, being that a state then housing the federal government, there's constitutional questions. We can go, an hour into that. But in 1973, basically Congress decided, okay, we'll allow you to elect a city council, have a mayor, in essence, govern yourself, even though, again, still we have final say. And that's given D.C. a bit of autonomy, but within that, there are things that say, for instance, the president can come in and take over the police department for a period of 30 days under an emergency. And this is like with almost everything that Trump has done regarding troops or immigration, the question really is, what is an emergency? And unfortunately, it should be Congress answering the question. Congress doesn't answer that question, so usually it has to go through the courts. After 30 days, so he has to advise Congress that he's done this. After 30 days, Congress then has to approve an extension, and I think that includes 60 votes in the Senate, which is probably unlikely to happen. And so I think that actually sets up Donald Trump to be able to say, look, we made some differences, we had, whatever, and then the Democrats came in and stopped us from doing it. It's put Democrats in a very bad position, I think, on this. But again, it's tough because we have to argue. You're arguing like current day crime issues, which are serious, against like constitutional questions, which are much higher on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization. And having troops on the streets is not a good thing. The last thing I'll say is there is a unique thing with Washington, D.C., in that the National Guard, and I'm a guardsman, I retired recently, the National Guard is actually under the purview of the president in Washington, D.C. Every other National Guard is under the state. And so the president has a lot more leverage. Also, I will quickly say, this goes against the whole January 6th talking point that Nancy Pelosi or the mayor of D.C. didn't call in the Guard because they actually have no control. The president does, as he's showing right now.
Yeah, Russell, January 6th feels like the elephant in this room. 800 federal troops have been called to D.C. this week, and yet President Trump delayed in calling troops back then. What do we make of that?
Well, we make of it the very fly-like attention span of the American people right now. The fact that people can have the same talking points just a matter of weeks ago. I can think of people that when I would raise the issue of January 6th would say back to me, well, President Trump, what could he do? He had no power. He had to just sit there in the room and drink Diet Coke and watch it on TV because he had no power over the National Guard, who are now saying, thank God for President Trump because he's calling up the National Guard without any sort of recognition that those are two completely different contradictory things. That's the way the media cycle works now. That's the way that human psychology in this partisan environment works now.
Adam, last month we had federal troops in LA over the deportations. The Atlantic notes that Washington, D.C. is both heavily Democratic and plurality black. Is it woke to say that there is some kind of racial dimension that's complicating this picture?
Oh, I mean, I certainly think there. I mean, all you have to hear is when Donald Trump kind of uses old tropes about crime. Whether it's overt and intentional, I don't know. But I do think there is some bias inherent in this. And, you know, and certainly a bias against Democrats. And that's the other thing, is the President of the United States obviously comes from a party. They obviously have political preferences. They obviously push for a certain agenda. But it's always been understood that they're the president of the whole country. And what you've seen here is clearly the president targeting blue states and blue cities. I live in Texas now. I haven't seen ICE raids here for some reason. Gosh, I wonder why. But you're seeing them in LA. And the thing is it's not just, you know, and I always tried to get on the media on this a little bit during the LA stuff, which is they were talking about the activation of the National Guard. Now, it's nuanced, but the reality is those were not National Guard troops. They were National Guard troops under a certain status. But when the president activates them without the consent of the governor, they become Title X federal troops. It is no different than the 82nd Airborne being deployed to Los Angeles. So they have the restrictions, and we were doing a disservice by calling them guardsmen because they were actually under a pay status that was U.S. Army versus National Guard. And the other thing on top of that, then, simply because of the chilling effect, he activates 250 members of the U.S. Marine Corps. Why else would you send the U.S. Marine Corps in except to intimidate? And I think the message here, and the thing that concerns me, again, we can look at Washington, D.C. and say crime is out of control. The National Guard could be helpful in alleviating some other things for the police. That's fine. But people are becoming numb to this. And when Donald Trump threatens Chicago next, or New York next, or whatever next, and we become numb to that, we need to think back to when the Declaration of Independence was declared. And it was declared because we don't want troops in the streets. Troops come in extreme cases when the very foundation of fabric and the fabric of life of our government of civilization is at stake. No other time. And this is unfortunately kind of the default play now.
Adam, what do you think this does to the preparedness of the military to deal with the actual threats overseas? I mean, we're not in a placid time.
Yeah, that's a big question because, look, every guardsman, now if you're a federal military, that's your day-to-day job, right? I know you know this well, Russell. But if you're a guardsman or a reservist, you're a 1 week in a month person. Now, you do that with the understanding that if there's a flood, a fire, riots, or if there's a war, you're willing to step up and do that. But there is a real cost to that. A significant amount of guard members are single parents, right? A significant number of them are in college. We're getting ready to start a school year. A significant number of them have civilian jobs. Maybe they're actually police officers. Probably a number of these DC guardsmen are actually cops, so that you're pulling cops off the street to put them in a different uniform. And so it's damaging to the readiness of the Guard. It's damaging to the morale of the Guard because very few Guard members want to stand there and face off against their fellow citizens. Trust me. And then it does real bad work for recruiting. One of the things Pete Hegseth continually says is we can't recruit into the military because we're too woke. And we do have a recruiting crisis. There's a whole number of reasons for it. This is not going to help on the National Guard side. And the National Guard, by the way, makes up a good quarter or more of our defense forces.
Russell, Adam refers to Congress. Why are they so quiet now, and where should they be acting?
Well, I mean, we could say that literally every week. Where's Congress? What's happening? I think we're in a broken system right now where Congress is acting like they're part of the cabinet of the president, and are there simply to affirm what he does. I don't think we can look to Congress to solve this right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And one of the reasons for that is because you have people like Adam Kinzinger who realize, okay, I'm not here to go on Fox News or MSNBC every week. I'm here to actually get legislation done the people like that are driven insane by Congress the way it is right now, and they're being replaced by people who do want to do that sort of thing, which means just whatever the party wants and whatever the personality at the head of the party wants, well, that's what we'll do.
Adam, if this is the case, talk to me about the day after. We've got this status for the next 30 days. What happens the day after?
So in order to really tell if this works, and look, I have no doubt this is going to reduce crime, because if you have presence patrols, you're going to at least push crime inside. You're going to prevent carjackings. In reality, we should create a military member for every square meter of the United States of America, and then we'd have zero crime. In 1984, the book, they had zero crime. So the thing is after the day after, you're not really going to be able to know until you get crime statistics. That takes a quarter or a year to get that. But what will happen is either this will be extended, possibly, or Donald Trump will simply say, well, the Democrats didn't extend this 30 days. I wish they would have. And so we have to take them out. And, they're responsible for the increase in crime. Or probably even a worst case scenario, he says, I know what the law says, but I am the head of the federal government. This is a federal law, and we're not relenting. And evidently, the mayor of D.C. is playing along. So who knows if she'll even stand up to resist.
Russell, in closing, Paul Schiff Berman, who is a former dean at the George Washington University Law School, was quoted in The Hill this week as saying that one of the most important bulwarks against authoritarian rule in the United States is the fact that we have a federalist system with shared sovereignty. What does he mean by that, and why should this matter particularly for us as Christians in this situation?
Well, to recognize the governing authorities that we're called to submit to in Romans chapter 13 in our system of government is state, local, federal, and each branch of all of those aspects of government that are, as the founders put it, jealous for their own powers. So it requires people who are saying you're not going to overstep into areas of our authority here. If you don't have that, if people aren't doing that, then you lose freedom and order and legitimate authority. And as Adam said, every single move toward authoritarianism or totalitarianism always comes with the argument, this is an emergency, we're in an unprecedented time, we're just going to do this for a little while, and we promise you, we really promise you, when this is all over with, we'll give it back to you.
Adam, is there any particular response for someone who lives in Texas or California or Illinois to this situation?
This is a tough thing. First off, I want to point out, in El Salvador, Bukele, who now just basically declared he can be elected as many times as he wants, did that under emergency powers. He suspended during COVID the Constitution. That allowed him now, and he'll be a dictator there. Look, I think if you're a citizen of Texas, look, I'd love to give you that there's a secret in the Constitution we didn't know about that we could stop this. The reality is if Congress makes a decision that they don't care, then that's the power. That is our power. It's like having a gun without bullets. If you have a gun without bullets, it's not lethal. And so that's kind of the situation here. So what I tell people is, first off, the best thing you can do is stop losing hope, okay? When you lose hope, the other side wins because they get energized on chaos. You and I get exhausted on it. So don't lose hope. Take time you need to keep the hope up. And secondly, we just have to look to next November and say we need to put people in Congress that are willing to guard their power. What's that going to do? It'll be a check on the executive branch, and then ultimately in 3.5 years, another decision will be made on that. But there's no secret thing in the Constitution that nobody's discovered. Unfortunately, we're kind of here for the ride. The key is we just have to keep kind of being focused on what that goal is. 1.5 years goes by pretty quick in hindsight, as you all well know.
I like that. Listeners, keep hope. Listen to the full episode wherever podcasts are found.